And again, a wonderful initiative, and thank you for the invitation. It's a privilege, and I look for resources wherever I can find them. So I have been scouring the TSSA website and your resources. I recognize Mr. Loft's name from just an article I read the other day that he had published. So I'm certainly going to get a lot from this conversation and future ones as well. So thank you for allowing me to participate. So really, I guess I'll just take a few minutes to talk about how we arrived in sort of in the mental health space and what we're doing there. As you know, with the Boilermakers, we're a heavy construction trade, so it's skilled tradespeople and industrial workers. So a heavy industrial environment, construction, maintenance, shipyards, railways, mining, quarries, cement. So it's I guess you think of the types of workers that go there, sort of like, hardworking, coveralls, work boots, so coming out of the gate, when we started looking at this, we recognized the disparity between, so I'm the health and safety director, and we know that we do safety quite well over the last sort of 20, 30 years of a lot of training and changing culture. And so we do safety well, but we weren't doing health very well at all. And so that led us into certain paths and certain rabbit holes about those discussions. But well, what do we do to help our members? Waiting for government regulations or waiting for the employer wasn't an option. So they either weren't equipped, or the consequences of doing health poorly is not always an immediate impact, as opposed to safety, especially in our industry when jobs can last 6, 7 weeks and then they move to the next job and they work for multiple employers in a run of a year. On the construction side. So it's a unique set of variables in our work environment. So we look for partnerships with organizations like the Canadian Mental Health Foundation, with NIOSH in the US, all around building a set of programs to tackle health and survey the members. What did they want help with, right? So health protection and health promotion on and off the job, and recognizing all of these things were long-term initiatives. And so we went for the sort of the things that were probably easier to build out of the gate around occupational health and even health promotion off the job. And mental health was kind of the outlier. It was the elephant in the room. We weren't really sure how to tackle it. There were some question marks of what we should do there. We didn't know what to do. And so I mentioned we partnered with the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and we tied into a training program there as sort of a launching point. And so we had a leap of faith. We didn't know how this was going to be received. Last year we rolled it out. You were hoping, our very first little workshop, we were hoping for maybe 20 people, and we had 80. And since then we've rolled out training courses all across the country, and every training course goes the same way. The first 20 minutes, it starts with everybody staring at the floor or at their shoelaces, because these are the big, macho construction workers, men and women. And so there's a certain, stigma. And then after about 20, 30 minutes, the floodgates open and you realize, how pervasive mental health is. Everyone is firsthand experience or, 1 degree removed from the mental health challenges. So it's been an overwhelming, and to my surprise, I'll be honest, just how quick the uptake has been and the reception to it. So we've continued with that programming, and that's been the foundation of our program. Now we're rolling into things like the peer support and programs like that have really taken off. I don't know if we would have been successful 10, 15 years ago. Maybe we would have been. I kind of wonder, maybe we should have started 10 years sooner. I don't know. But all I can say is now, to our surprise, the reception to it has been phenomenal. And so it's a credit to the members, so I could talk more about what's in the programs and stuff like that later if you'd like.
We have some time if you wanted to talk a bit more about the programs or particular things that have been successful. Or
yeah, absolutely. So one of the programs we worked with was so there was pieces already in place. So we have 14 separate health and safety jurisdictions in Canada. And on the books across each of those 14 jurisdictions, the employer is required to have, harassment and anti-bullying policies and things like that. But in action, it's a piece of paper in a binder somewhere. So not really a lot there. But a couple of years, so there was pieces developed that tie into the mental health. So within the Boilermakers, they rolled out a code of conduct and a code of practice and expectations, for acceptable behavior and attitudes. And so that was a small piece that helps contribute to changing the culture over time. But really, the cornerstone for our program was the Working Mind program that we adapted from the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and that's really about challenging the attitudes and behaviors around mental health from, as you pointed out, from an environment point of view, and how to knock down stigma and address stigma. So the way the program is built and the practical applications that come out of that programming, you're not just talking at the students or at the members. They very quickly, it's an interactive sort of experience, and very quickly everyone's sitting there in their little bubble thinking that maybe they know someone that's struggling with mental health or somebody who's died from suicide or what have you, and then very quickly you realize that everyone in the room has a similar experience. But again, it's that silent illness and nobody else, because we weren't talking about it, because it was, so you had to, it's the suck it up buttercup sort of mentality, a legacy of a bygone era, that was still there just on the fringes. And soon as you sort of chipped away at that with the training course, the floodgates opened, and we've run this course with young apprentices. So we've made it mandatory with our apprentices. We've made it mandatory with our shop stewards, and then we're rolling it into the supervision courses as well. So the idea is that over time, they learn about the mental health continuum, about the stigma and discrimination, and how to identify it in the environment, how to tackle it and deal with it with the employer, accommodations, return to work, and there's a whole host of sort of sublets out of that. The worker program is about 4 hours, and the supervisor's course is about 8 hours. So there's two different courses. We teach it, the union teaches it, and we've been invited into employers' training centers to deliver to their own people. So that's the union going in and delivering the mental health training to our employers, which has been a great sort of collaboration as well, because again, they're hearing that message from our point of view, and they're getting their training from us. So that's been a wonderful sort of experience. And again, we, like any pilot project, like everything that you do, that's an experiment. You're hopeful. You've got good quality programming. You hope it's going to be well received, but we had no idea just how well. So as we strike up our mental health committee and we're developing the peer support, we have volunteers coming out of the woodwork, looking to engage and participate, all of which, again, a few years ago, we had no idea that there was that kind of appetite. So it's kind of like being in charge of an oasis in the middle of a desert, not realizing everyone around you was thirsty type thing. So it's been a tremendous sort of program for us, and we can see it again. It's a long-term initiative. It's supported in our organization right from the top of our leadership right down to the business managers at the local lodge level. And of course with the members' participation. And then so we expect to get to a critical mass where once we get to a certain training point where on every job site people will recognize terms like the mental health continuum and stigma and those types of things, and understand there's a better way. So we're quite excited for this. We think this is going to be a culture shift in terms of how we talk about mental health, and bring it out into the open and have it as no different than how we talk about physical health. So it's quite exciting, and we're quite thrilled for it. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just before we maybe hear from Steve and then get a bit more of a discussion going between us, in terms of your employers, do you think they have a grasp on how much they're actually losing as a result of not tackling mental well-being in the workplace?
My personal take on that is I would say no, because the short answer is no. I mean, you see the studies, of course, and so in Canada, they talk about $50 billion a year and the lost productivity and those things. I think they understand it anecdotally. That if someone's not here today, then they've got to replace that person, and there's some reason they're not here today, or but would they recognize it in terms of? I really don't believe so. I think it's such an area that hasn't got. I mean, we have a standard on psychological health here in Canada with the CSA. It's a voluntary standard. I'm not aware of any of our employers that have actually adopted the standard. That's on our drawing board. That's as we go through our program and we look at other areas that we'll go into, how to provide better supports and reach out to family, but also to our employers. That'll be a big push in terms of getting, going from sort of just policy to action and grasping it, including it. Again, one of the great articles around, including mental health inside the risk assessment. But that requires for them, most of our projects and job sites, it's a critical path. It's high intensity work, short duration. It's 1,000 things coming at them a minute, and you want to stop and talk about anything health related. Never mind mental health, just health in general. They all, there's a, they're too busy charging forward, and so that requires a conversation. And we've been successful over the last few years in terms of classic, health protection, having the right respirator on, and those types of things. And so now now the conversation around mental health, they're not aware of the impact, I don't believe, on their job site. So that's a part of the education that's going to have to take place.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Jason. That's really insightful, and looking forward to the rest of our discussion and bringing you in on that. And welcome. We've had another person join us. Anand, thank you for joining us. Steve, it would be great to hear from you now. Obviously, Steve's a member of TSSA and has been for some time, and is working with us on our mental health and wellbeing community of practice. So anyway, I won't take away from what you're going to share, Steve,
No.
but by all means, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think it's probably, thank you, Nadine, for inviting me too, and it's a real pleasure to meet with colleagues from other countries and also other TSSA colleagues too. I'm probably best that I share with you my story, my journey. What I call my story is Every Journey Matters, and that's because I worked for Transport for London, and that was their strapline, and still is, I think. And yeah, as Nadine said, I was a TSSA member. My background is I'm a qualified accountant, and I worked in various local authorities, and I used to work for Kent Police, and Kent Police brought in the automatic number plate recognition in the south of England. And because of my work on that, Transport for London was a nice fit because congestion charging got brought in. So that's how I moved. I'd always worked locally in the southeast area until I got tempted to the bright lights of London in 2003. And I started work at TfL, joined TSSA automatically. My father was a union rep for a number of years, where he worked in Woolwich Arsenal, which was a munitions factory, for people that are not aware of that. And so unions have always been close to my heart. And my journey in TfL was a good one to start with. I started in the finance team, and what I soon found out was it's a pretty, change happens quite a bit in TfL. They're a little bit bored if something's not changing within about a year. So I sort of saw that happening. I was there for 14 years, and I must have had about 7 different jobs in that time, because things kept changing all the time, every 2 years. And I quite enjoyed the work there. If I was to say to you that I was worried about my mental health and and well-being, no, probably I used to work fairly long hours. I was a middle manager there, so I had a team to look after, and also was getting managers demanding some quite work, deadlines to meet. Very command and control in some parts of the organisation, for those that know it, and very diverse organisation. So, Jason mentioned about engineers and sort of construction. We had a bit of that, but also office workers, call centres, frontline customer service staff. So a really diverse organisation. And things were going quite well till Olympic year in 2012. And if I could just describe that, one day I just felt as though I just couldn't get up. I describe it as like hitting a brick wall. And my body just gave up on me. It was definitely what we classified as a burnout or a breakdown, or whatever people want to call that. Partly it was work, because that was a really busy time. As you can imagine, we had the deadline of getting things ready for the Olympics. And also I had some life events around family. My wife was quite unwell at the time, and I had a 7-year-old son who needed looking after. So it was a range of things. But I think a large chunk of it was probably work. And now on looking back, there were some signs that if I'd known then what I know now, in terms of telltale signs about struggling with our mental health, then certainly I would have probably stopped still and started asking for help, because that's the type of person I am. I'm not someone that I like the term "suck it up, buttercup." I wasn't that type of person. I've always been quite open about talking about my feelings, but I think I never really saw the signs. And I think this is the thing: it's ignorance that blindness and blindness to it. So what happened then? I went and saw my GP. He signed me off for a month. I got some antidepressant medication, which is the way it happens in the UK with GPs. That seems to be the first point of call. Was in 2012. And I was told to take a bit of a rest. I think on the sick note, it was stress-related, work-related stress. So, from what I described, that's what the GP identified. Now, what was going on for me at the time was I was feeling very guilty about letting my colleagues down at the time, because they were all working really hard. And the fact that I wasn't there, that would have been a real, it was playing on my mind, and I was worried about that. So I went back to work after the month. The GP said to me, "Are you sure?" And no, it was my decision. No one was putting me under pressure. I decided to go back after a month. And my experience of going back to TfL, my first day back, and we talk about return to work, was I got to the door at North Greenwich, and just so happened, coincidentally, the security pass didn't work. So I had to go to the reception. I must admit, when you've been off a month and you're struggling with a mental health condition, it's quite tiring to commute. And to get to the barrier and then find that you're pushed back, psychologically, I think what was going on in my mind is, I'm getting knocked back here. And then I went to the reception, they sorted me out, and I got to my desk, and no one knew. My manager hadn't told anyone what I'd been going through. He decided, there wasn't a discussion, but that was what happened. And I went I remember my desk was right in the corner of the room. I went there, and a few people said hello, but no one came and spoke to me or anything like that. So they knew that it was something to do with a mental health issue, and stress, but they didn't know exactly what it was, and nor did I at that time. So I went to my desk, I logged in, and what happens when you've been off a month? You forget your password. So that straight away, I'm phoning up the IT team, and they're giving me the password, which was fine. And then I log in. And I logged in, and the emails that came up, it just looked like, to me, I remember looking at it, and it was just like one after the other after the other. And I think there was about 3,500 emails there that were sitting there that I hadn't looked at. And the first one I logged into, I always remember it was someone saying, "Steve, why haven't you responded? There's this deadline to meet." And that just basically, that was it. I just sat at the desk and started crying. I broke down. I just couldn't cope with seeing that message. And I think that was, the saying goes, a straw that broke the camel's back. And the first person I phoned up was my TSSA rep at the time, who was also a friend. And she came over straight away. she had a chat with me in the canteen, took me down to the canteen. Well, I went down to the canteen, we agreed to meet there. And she got me in a taxi and we got home. And I didn't go back to work for another 7 months. So I was off for 8 months after that. Now, that was not the ideal return to work. My manager wasn't there, by the way. He'd taken a day off leave on the same day. He was a good manager, a good line manager. I'm not critical of him. I think it was more ignorance rather than malice that led to that. And it was me as well, because I tried to go back after a month. And what happened after that was that I had regular phone calls with my line manager, which was good. And that wasn't the practice at the time at TfL. Anyone with a mental health condition, they tended to be advised not to talk to people, you know, keep away, or otherwise you're going to wind them up more or make them worse. But from my experience, the phone calls are really, really useful. I went back to my GP and got different types of medication. And during the few months, I think I know 2 or 3, quite a few numbers of names of different antidepressant medications. And then after 6 months, I had what they call a review meeting. And all of a sudden, what used to was like friendly chats with my line manager become sitting with the HR person and someone taking notes. And then all of a sudden, someone that was still unwell, and I was still unwell at that time because I'd had sort of minor counselling, which wasn't really what I needed. And the medication was only getting me through things, I was sort of like surviving, not really living. And I sort of had this interview, and all of a sudden, then the HR person said to me, Steve, you know, this is the process. So we've got to go through this process. And they were really quite hard on me. And they were talking about, you know, they started talking about, you know, if you don't get any better, we might have to let you go, sort of thing. And I'd been a high performer in the organisation. You know, I've always done well in my performance reviews. My sickness record, you know, is pretty minimal. And I'd always been a willing worker. And then all of a sudden to get hit with this, that was quite devastating. And it got to the stage where I was having suicidal thoughts at that time over that. And I did phone my manager up and said, look, you know, I'm really thinking I just want to quit. And I remember we had a coffee. I came into Victoria to meet him because I needed a face-to-face. And I was actually saying to him, look, I've just had enough. You know, I'm not going to get well with, you know, just all the worry of the work and everything. And credit to him, he said, no, Steve, look, I'm going to stick by you. I've got to find out, you know, what we got to do to get you better. You know, what can we support you with? And what he found out, and I didn't know, and, you know, that at the time there was an employee assistance program and lots of support going on, but no one seemed to be able to share that or know it, either managers or even the HR people. And I found out that I was actually covered under the private health scheme, because of my sort of grade, and I'd been paying it for the number of years I'd been there. And so basically, we got me a psychiatrist interview about a couple of weeks after talking to him. And I went to this guy, and he was amazing. And he was asking me all these sort of strange and weird questions about whether did I grind my teeth when I was a child, and did I have sleepovers with people when I was a kid, and how, you know, sociable am I, and all these sorts of questions. And then he said to me, Steve, you know, I think you're struggling with what they call generalized anxiety disorder. So I've been medicated and supported for depression, but I actually had anxiety. And along with the anxiety came a depressive episode. So that hitting the wall was the final straw for my body, and I was depressed, and I just couldn't move out of that. So he's changed my medication. He changed my medication to an anxiety tablet and an antidepressant, a different one, and also referred me for psychological therapy. And I saw that psychiatrist 12 times, and normally you only see a psychiatrist 3 or 4 times. And I saw the psychologist a total of 22 sessions. I think normally in this country, we're talking about 12 sessions people get. But I got 22 with a psychologist, not a counsellor. And that sort of turned my life around. And I'll give you an example of how broken I was at the time. My second session with the psychologist, he gave me a seed and a pot and told me to give me some instructions and told me to put a seed into the pot with the earth and grow a plant. And the idea around that was two things. And the next week I came back proudly with a seed in the pot, in the pot, and showed him how it was starting to grow and how I'd watered it, and I'd followed his instructions. And he said, Steve, this is, you've got hope here, because I've got people that will read that sheet for 4 weeks, then come back to me 4 weeks and not done anything with it. So, that was a growth. And that plant, I always remember I grew it and brought it in every week. And that was showing me that there was some hope around, there is hope. And that therapy was pretty amazing for me. It got me stronger and stronger. And within about 2-3 months of that 6-month review, I was back at work. And I felt really, really strong. And I suppose it could have gone 2 ways for me. In my mind, probably I would have thought, well, look, I got treated pretty badly with that return to work, and I could get angry about this. But what I felt personally was I didn't want anyone to go through what I went through. And if I can, stop one person going through that, that would be amazing. And I also thought my line manager he genuinely was concerned, but he just did not have a clue what to do. So when I came back to TfL, I did have sat down and chat with my line manager and said, look, the work I've got to calm down on. And I would also like to get involved in talking to occupational health and sharing my story. And I started sharing my story with my own team, which was tough, but it was really empowering after I'd done it. And from there, we started talking about how we could educate people and make people aware of what it's like to be with a mental health issue or problem and challenges, emotional challenges in the workplace. And to credit to TfL at that time, they were a listening organisation. My boss let me go and do talks around the business. We also did 2 other things. We set up a peer support group, which started off with just me and a couple of other people that I met through a staff network group at TfL. And we now, that group grew to, I think there's a mailing list of about 300 people are there at the moment, I hear. And we used to have regular monthly meetings where people got together and talked about just generally offloading what was going on for them within the organisation in a safe and confidential space. And the other thing that happened was there's an organisation in this country called Time to Change, which is a social movement that's aimed at changing the way we think and act around mental health. And they had a pledge for a workplace, an employer pledge. And TfL had signed that a few years ago, but you wouldn't believe it with the way sort of it was working. I think it was a tick in the box exercise. So what we did was we encouraged them to re-pledge it, and the peer support pressure from that group, and also the help of TSSA, because they were always supportive at the time. The reps there were always supportive of what we were doing. We managed to get the organisation to sign a pledge, which is a bit like Jason mentioned, like a code of conduct or a standard within a workplace. And that pledge, we also kept a check on what they, the pledge is like as an action plan. And it's really important that we didn't go back to the way it was before, where it was just a signed document that looked all good on the day, but then on World Mental Health Day or whenever it gets launched and nothing happens afterwards. We managed to keep checking in on that things were happening, and it was an action plan, so there was things that needed to be done. And so we trailed them and checked them and made sure that was happening. And the other thing that really was a breakthrough for us was I got a phone call from the Equality and Inclusion manager at the time there, who said, what happens in the public service is that we've got a few spare pounds at the end of the year, which we need to spend. And could you do anything with it, Steve, for the group? Because by that time, we built up quite a positive reputation. So I'd come across a thing called mental health first aid. We managed to get funding for 20 places to be done by a trainer who came in, and I managed to get hold of someone really quickly to deliver it. And what we also did was monitor the effectiveness of those, because it's okay to have them in as a badge, but we wanted to make sure they were making a difference. And alongside our occupational health team, we brought those in. And they proved really effective in the areas that the people were put in, and we were quite careful. I remember we advertised and we actually interviewed, and these are voluntary roles, no payment, nothing, no allowance. And of those 20 positions, I think we got about 50 applications. So we knew, a bit like Jason said, there was a taster first for it. And you've got to realise this was 2012, 2013, when mental health wasn't the profile it had now. So to get that then was amazing. And the people we interviewed, every one of them was affected in some way, either personally or through relatives or friends. And that was their commitment. And they were obviously genuinely caring people who wanted to support fellow human beings. And it was quite touching doing those interviews. But from those 20, TfL in the next few years, I think they've now got about 240, 250 across the organisation that done. So what happened after that? So I all of a sudden, because of the peer support group and time to change work, I started getting asked to go and do talks, masterclass talks across the country for time to change. And TfL did allow me to do that, to encourage other organisations to go through the peer support route, which I fully believe to this day is the best way forward, in terms of organisations. And I think, as Jason said, if you wait for the employers, you'll be waiting forever. But if it comes from the people at the right levels who are really keen to do this, it happens. And that's what happened. And, I had the pleasure of talking to a number of organisations, rail companies as well, across other ones as well. And in 2017, there was another reorganisation, yet another one. And by that time, my taste for my work, which was quality management in IT at the time, I'd lost my mojo for that, but I had got a mojo for mental health support. So I took the severance. I left on good terms, and I moved away and spent a year with Time to Change as a volunteer, training and learning to train and consult companies across Britain, mainly in the north of Britain, because my colleague was a single parent, so she could only get as far as Birmingham. So I went to some lovely places across northern England and met some amazing people with amazing stories. And Jason resonated with me when he said about the 20 minutes where no one says anything, and then all of a sudden, once you've got the trust and the confidentiality and the safety, whoosh, you get so many great stories. And the stories are the ones that are the powerful things. And I did that for a year and a half, and then decided, because Time to Change are changing the way they were doing the training, that probably let's go it alone. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 and a bit years, is freelancing. And it's really been useful for TSSA to, still have that tie with them, and they got the trust in me to provide training of mental health awareness for their own employers and also across the reps. And I've also done work with the General Municipal Union as well. So the unions are always close to my heart. The other thing that was a real touching moment for me was when Nadine said that TSSA were going for the pledge, the Time to Change pledge, because I really believe in Time to Change as an organisation, as a movement, and only the second union to do that. So that was amazing, and I was really proud and privileged that I was part of helping and encouraging that too. What's happening now for me? Well, obviously with lockdown, it's been a bit quiet. I've been doing a lot of voluntary work. I've been working with Time to Change again. Frazzle Cafe, Ruby Wax does daily sharing sessions for individuals, and I've been involved in that. And I'm also, to balance that, I'm working with an organisation called Action for Happiness, and people might have seen the calendars that they produce every month, which is more on the positive psychology side. So when people are strong, how do you keep strong, and how do you keep well? And that's what they do, but more on the positive side. So I thought it would probably be best to share my journey. And I think from my story, there's things that will come out in the other questions that will probably be relevant. But that's where I've come from. And if it wasn't for TSSA and that support of that rep, who knows what would have happened? I really, that's why I'm a very loyal person, and I always believe that TSSA helped me. There was a few others, but that rep made a difference to my life. And for reps, any rep that's working for a union, they got my utmost respect and support for what they're doing. And I respect it's not always an easy job. And you know so that's what changed my life in a way. So here I am now, and stronger and happier, and you know, living life to the full as best I can.
Steve, thank you so much. Very powerful story that you have there, and I'm glad you shared the journey, because sometimes we forget we're all on a journey, and we just go straight to the strategic talk or what we need to do, and forget that actually it's those moments that motivate us, that drive us forward and help us do better work. The experiences we have and the experiences members have generally. Look, a couple of things struck me from what you were saying. Firstly, I think we're learning time and time again in particular with our work around equalities, that managers just don't have enough support or training or knowledge about what to do. And over here, obviously, we talk about reasonable adjustments. If someone has a disability, or if someone comes back to work and there's a need to make an adjustment to ensure that they can participate in the workforce fully. We've learnt this with our neurodiversity work as well, that actually managers get stuck because whilst the organization might provide all bells and whistles at various levels, navigating their own internal processes of how they get a reasonable adjustment for you, or how they can make things happen to support people, is difficult enough, on top of people's lack of understanding, or as you say, not knowing like what the signs are, and being able to see that. So I think that that struck me. And TSSA, we represent managers as well, and so that's partly why we've developed this community of practice, so that actually we can provide a space that the employers clearly aren't providing for their own levels of management. We can provide the space so that people can share and learn from one another. So I think that that's a really key point that you've made there. And also, I would like to say I'm very proud that we signed a Time to Change pledge. I'm very annoyed that we were second union to do so and not the first. And you know how close that was. It was like a matter of weeks. So anyway, we're there, and yes, we want to make that meaningful. And just going back to something, Jason, you were saying as well, for us signing that Time to Change pledge is not simply the union doing something that looks good. We actually want to build that partnership with the organization leading it, Time to Change in mind, in the same way that we're building partnerships with LGBT+ organizations for our LGBT+ work. And I think that those partnerships, in part recognition that as unions, we don't have all the answers. So, but there's organizations that can help us, and partnering with them makes us that much stronger, and that's much more credible, and harder for employers to swerve us or to deny talks with us about these important issues as well. So, so thanks for that. I've got a couple of questions that I've sent you some questions as speakers that I think that we'd like to hear from, but reflecting on the time, and I know that we'll have Gareth, have we got some questions coming in on the chat yet?
No, nothing over in chat corner just yet.
Okay.
But I've shared some links with you as people have been talking. So so feel free to lift them and then save them for further reading after.
Okay.
And then, as Nadine said, feel free to ask me some questions in the chat. I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. Any participants have some questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get to that shortly. The first kind of questions that I'd like Jason and Steve to consider around what you think the impacts of poor mental health are on your on colleagues in your industry and in your context. How is that coming through for you? And second to that, why is it important for trade unions to be involved in mental health issues, and not just leave it to employers or agencies external to deal with? So over to both of you to give your perspective on that.
You want to take your first run at it, or?
Yeah, I'll take the first run then.
Go ahead.
So, thanks, Jason. I can talk from, obviously, not from a union rep perspective, but from my own experience. And going back to my story, when I look back, some of the telltale signs were that I wasn't meeting deadlines and emails. That 3,500 emails wasn't. I used to be on top of them, and I appreciate it was off a month, but there was some there that I probably hadn't got on top of. So there were telltale signs there that things were not working for me. I wasn't getting to a disciplinary stage, but it certainly was having a massive impact on my performance. Why didn't I speak up? Perhaps there was a little bit behind the stigma and discrimination around at the time. There's an expectation as a senior manager or a middle manager that you have to carry the weight on your shoulders. And it's a bit like the captain on the Titanic has to stay on the boat till the end. And I think that's there was a little bit of that there. And probably being a man as well, there's a lot of talk about men's mental health in this country and the stigma around that and the conditioning that we've had. I mean, my father was a sheet metal worker. He's a real working class man, and probably there was things that have been pushed down to me about just man up and get on with things, and you just have to cope with it, and that R word, resilient, be resilient, and all that sort of thing. And maybe I just wasn't in that right place. And, maybe if I hadn't have had that conditioning, I would have opened up a bit more. And in hindsight, it surprised me I didn't. But I think at the time also, the workplace, the conditions were such that we were under a lot of pressure to deliver. And with that, all things go out the window, including worrying about people's welfare, including your own. There's a lot of self-responsibility, and I wasn't doing that. I remember working over lunch hours, not eating properly, no exercise, just getting on because things had to be done. And the work was the most important thing. Why trade unions? Second part of the question, the importance of trade unions. Well, as I said previously, that trade union rep was a real, that saved me significantly, got me out of a place where I could have actually gone back into that office and just probably tried to cope a little bit longer, and who knows, I may have got to a more desperate place where I really did need that space. And not only actually kept in contact, kept checking in with me as well, and also throughout my confinement, illness, that they were always checking in as well. So I mentioned the line manager, but the union were always very good in that respect, and also keeping me supported at review meetings and things like that. And I think we're talking about human beings here, and the union rep and the union involvement, it gives you that little bit of strength that you need perhaps when you're not feeling so great, and having that alongside you, it's like a bit of a hand-holding thing. And even if my wife had been well, she wouldn't have understood the way my workplace worked, but union people do. So if you like, they're a little bit like your family while you're there, and friends, and also navigating the policies and rules and regulations when you're just trying to get on with your work day to day, and having someone there that knows it inside out, it just eases that burden. So that's what I've always found is important, and information too. So that, from my experience of the other side of it, that's how it helped me. So hopefully that's answered your question. I'll leave it to Jason. Sorry.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. And hard to follow, but so I think that with the first question, I mean, sort of the impact of poor mental health, and we're all aware for our individual countries, the sort of the stats. I know here in Canada, it's 1 in 3 over a lifetime will struggle with mental health, and they talk about 11, 12 suicides a day, and those types of disturbing statistics. And it just goes, when you see that kind of how common it is, and then not to sort of to be aware, like it's not in the newspaper, it doesn't make the front page, that kind of thing. So this silent illness. So then we walk it down from at a societal level down to sort of our industry, and construction workers in particular here in North America. You look at the different stats from US CDC and folks like that, and they talk about 60% of construction workers struggle with mental health. And they are the highest category for suicides across all occupations year over year, both in rate and total numbers. So there's the impact. That's like at the bottom of the sheet there as you tally it up, and you can see this devastation that poor mental health and or unsupported mental health can have. And then we have all kinds of anecdotal stories within our industry and within our trade. And I have my own personal experiences with individuals, and so that certainly highlighted the gap between where we were and where we needed to be. And it was certainly. And again, I can understand how some of this evolved over time. Why we started with safety first and then moved to health, and there's but we're here now, and my only regret is we didn't start 20 years ago, and of course there's no time machine, so we do it today going forward. Why it's important for us as a union, well, our expression is, and I'm sure we're not the only ones, but we're only as healthy as our membership, and in creating safe workplaces for members where they can discuss their mental health openly as they would a physical ailment, and creating those safe spaces for people, and to have it as just as common a discussion as anything else health related that someone wanted to discuss or bring forward, and creating those social interactions. And but nothing's been given to us. I mean, everything from wages and benefits to, everything that we have on a job site is negotiated by the unions. And so I don't think that's any different with mental health. It's not going to just be given to us. The employer is not going to show up on a silver platter, and the government, at least from where I am and where I am, that they are, it's something. It'll only become a priority if we make it a priority, and so that's our position as we move forward with this initiative, is that we're making it a priority, and because of, again, the leadership through the organization and the uptake right down to the rank and file member, the tradespeople right down on the tools, and the uptake for it is what's going to make it a success. And we have that change in culture. We'll drag the employers along. They'll come along, but it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of education, a lot of training, and but it's a worthy endeavor. There's no quick fixes. A bumper sticker is not going to do it. Flavor of the month program is not going to achieve what we want to achieve. It has to be a long-term initiative that becomes ingrained into everything we do. So that's where we're headed.
Okay, thank you both for that. I think just leading on from that, in particular, why it's important for trade unions to be involved in mental health issues. I think we talk a lot about the struggle with employers, but we also have challenges within our own context of the trade union, recognizing that the employees, that they are our members. And so what do you feel, Jason in particular, what do you feel are the greatest challenges that your union face on driving this work forward at this point in time? And maybe Steve, after that, you could talk about that from, you do a lot of work with a variety of employers. What do you think are some of the challenges that are out there to drive this work forward?
I'll say from our perspective, and again, as a pilot project we launched last year, if you had asked me this question last year, I was expecting one of the biggest challenges to be what was going to be the uptake. I didn't know that it was going to be as well received as it was. I didn't know that that folks were so ready and willing to engage on the topic of mental health the way they have. I was totally caught by surprise. So that would have been my answer a year ago. So today, sitting here, one of our challenges, it's more around logistics. I can't train them fast enough, and they're a traveling band of trade. Like they move around the country. Like they're not in most Boilermakers are not in one spot for very long. They move to different projects. they're on the road, crisscrossing the continent. So delivery and those types of things are challenging. But again, challenges that can be overcome. But they are practical considerations. And really, it's just about continuing the momentum. Getting to a point, like to a saturation level, where you can't step onto a single job site anywhere in the country where at least some people haven't been through the training and understand what it is, that we have peer support people on every project. Those types of things are our long-term goals, but it's the challenge of delivery for us. If they would stay put, if they would all just work 8 to 5 in the same facility, that it would be easy, not easy, but easier. So that's certainly a challenge for us. It's the nature of our occupation. And again, we've already touched on it, but the employer piece will be challenging because, when we look at them, as we pulling back the layers, or if we stood in front of a whiteboard, there's like 50 ideas we want to tackle around mental health. And then that's another challenge, is having the patience to go, we can only do so many things and do them well, and then move to the next item. So how we prioritize and so we are moving to that piece around the employer and how we bring them along. And some have come on, some have been early adopters. Like I mentioned earlier, they allowed us to come in and train their supervisors at their facility. It was their sort of, internal conference, and we were brought in. So, I mean, they took a leap of faith as well, like that we didn't get up on stage and, with a box of tomatoes and just throw it at them and tell them that they're all doing a terrible job, that we train them properly so that they would become better supervisors and better equipped around mental health. So doing more of that is one of our goals as well. But again, it's really our big challenge right now. It's more just the practical logistics of delivering the training, but it's one we're gearing up for sure.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I think all of those things resonate with us as a union as well, and it's the employer engagement is what we're focusing on moving forward. And I think certainly from our perspective, I believe that our employers, to a certain degree, are open to having the conversation with us. It's how far they're going to push their own boundaries and change what they're doing. So I won't take up all that space, though. That's Steve, if you could share your thoughts.
Yeah, so two of the things I didn't share in my story was, just before I left TfL, I got invited to produce a report, a part of a working party that produced a report called Thriving at Work, which was recommendations. It was a government-backed paper, which was looking at how workplaces could really look after the employees better, and it was called Thriving at Work, and it had a number of recommendations which when we did the report, we thought would be brought in some form of either legislation or strong recommendation through a health and safety route. Unfortunately, it wasn't mandated. I think that was potentially because of the change in leadership or the mess that was going on in government at that time. But that was and that paper still exists, and the charities like Mind and Rethink Mental Illness have really been supportive of trying to push that and raise these standards. And I think what Nadine was mentioning earlier about the bargaining standards, I think that's the way forward. I think the challenge is getting that to be taken on. With private companies, I think there needs to be some form of reporting around well-being in the company. Once it becomes mandatory that they do some form of reporting, what most command and control or performance-driven companies have, they need to have something like that built in. Stone will do an index for companies, and I think there needs to be a mental health version of that. I know that Mind have been trying to develop that as a charity for a while, and I think the numbers are picking up. And also, I believe that the younger people, particularly coming out of university, are a lot more savvy around mental health. Before I left TfL, I did a talk to the graduate engineers at TfL, and that was one of the most heartwarming and amazing experiences because of how keen and enthusiastic they are. And they're the managers of the future. So, you know, seeing that and thinking, well, hopefully in 5-10 years time, we're going to have a more empathetic and understanding management tier is warming, and hopefully that's that. I think management training, definitely, I think that's come up in the chat, awareness training, but also general management skills around active listening and, you know, having a conversation and looking empathy are really, really important. A lot of the struggles of my experience are managers that just feel a job's to do for the task and they forget there's a person behind it. So I think that form of training, proper training, and badging it as mental health and well-being, if you don't want to say it's management training or whatever, might be a way forward. But I think encouraging employers that actually it's an investment, not a cost, to have these sort of interventions. And that for profitable companies, they'll actually make more profit by having a workforce and a culture that supports each other. That's the message it needs to get across. I do feel at the moment politically and with what's going on in the world, it's been stalled a bit, and we're going to need to try and build that momentum. I think research and the statistics that will come out about the number of people affected with mental health conditions and people that have never actually experienced it before, but because of this current pandemic situation are experiencing it, could actually indirectly generate more empathy. That could be the case. But I think also the other challenge we got is people going off unwell with mental health conditions, the provision and support that's available for them to get them, you know, like me, back well and fit and you know, raring to go. That's going to be a challenge too. And so unions actually supporting people off work and also the return to work too. That's the sort of things we should be thinking about carefully.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I think there's definitely some good direction in what you're saying there, and you know, where we're at with our bargaining standards is we're almost at a final draft. So we're looking to get that right, and we've got a couple of other bargaining standards, so we want them to be kind of comparable in terms of how they're structured, etc. So watch this space; it will be ready very soon. I've been promising that for a while, but I absolutely promise it will be ready soon. Look, thank you so much for the contributors today. I've got one last question which you can use as a wrap up. And that's really, what action or key action should we take to progress our work on mental health, in your opinion?
I'll start, Jason. Yeah, I mean, everyone that's here tonight, I think if you can go away and if you're not so aware about mental health and you know, any sort of awareness, find out, look at charities like Mind, TSSA, what we're doing. Just knowledge and experience and education are really, really important. But I think on a personal level, just actually looking into yourself and looking how you're feeling and what your thoughts are, and you know, really being honest with yourself and respecting the fact that we all have feelings, we're all different, and we all have mental health. I think we forget about that. We're quite easy to go to the gym and go running and do running and that sort of thing. But what are we doing for our minds? So, you know, if you look after yourself, then you can look after others. The number of union reps I used to see, and you know, sometimes they're the kindest hearts in the world to look after others, but were they looking after themselves? So I think self-care, there's a saying, you can't drink from an empty cup. And I think that, you know, that's what I would say to people, you know, look for how you can keep yourself well, and then you'll be at the best for others. So, you know, that would be my advice.
Oh, he's too hard to follow. That's wonderful. Really, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. So when I was thinking about these types of questions, and so I'll just put it in the context of, you know, when I think about this, and it's really just moving to action. You know, if we haven't already done so, and I realize again, I'm preaching to the choir here. And for us, it was, you know, that old adage of, you know, a good plan now rather than a perfect plan tomorrow, and you know, taking that leap of faith, piloting projects out, looking for credible partners, getting that continuous member feedback and tweaking the programs as needed, so that we're really accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish, and supporting and helping our members. involving everyone in the organization, right from in our organizational structure, right from the president right down to the brand new apprentice, you know, with the shiny hard hat and who has never seen a job site, and everyone in between, and knowing that it's a long-term initiative. There's no quick fixes on these types of things. I'm constantly learning, and I've got notes all over my desk for takeaways and wonderful resources already, and follow-up questions. So this has been immensely beneficial to myself. And so, I mean, right now, I think for me, the takeaway is, and I always think of this in individual contexts and people I've dealt with over the years, and that there's a member out there right now in each of our organizations struggling with mental health, and we know this, and we each have the ability to help, whether it's through our formal programs and policies and procedures, or if it's just, you know, listening with empathy and respect and dignity, we can have a positive impact. So I think, you know, it's something that we just have to become a part of our culture, and something we do every day. So that's
Yeah,
it. That's all I have.
And I think Pauline's made a really good point just saying about the social model and not forgetting about that. We're very much tied up with illness and diagnoses and things like that, but it's really just about, you know, it's more about well-being and where we sit in society and where we sit with ourselves. So I think the social model's a nice way of describing and communicating things. So. Yeah,
I think it also it leads us towards proactivity as well, because in reality, a lot of people who will be affected by mental ill health in the workplace won't actually be diagnosed. They won't necessarily have a disability according to the law, and how that is defined. But there are plenty of things that we can do to actually make workplaces better for people, or to support people who are finding themselves struggling. Absolutely. So thank you so much to our guests. I think I started this event by talking about the communities of practice and just generating more conversations. And it was an experiment for us to share these experiences from different countries. I think we'd love to see more of that happening. So welcome the involvement of our friends from the Boilermakers in our community of practice and others in our community of practice, so we can keep these conversations going, share our tools, share our knowledge, and keep in touch of where we're at with our initiatives, so we can share that learning as we go along. So thank you all for participating. It's been great. It's been wonderful. Have a good evening or afternoon or morning where you are, and enjoy World Mental Health Day on the 10th as well, and hope that everyone has a good day and is happy with their families. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nice to see you. Take care.